So our next speaker is Bernd, and he'll be looking at interaction between cybernetics and behavioralism. What happens as more and more machines enter into our lives? How do we manage it all? And Bernd has a very interesting background. He's a hacker veteran at the Chaos Computer Club. So if you want to speak to a hacker, here's your chance. And he's been doing this for over 20 years. So I'm looking forward to hearing about some very interesting topics like freedom of information and digital disobedience. So I hand over to Bernd.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this introduction, and thank you that you are joining this conference, which I think is very important in an area like Bulgaria as well. When I was asked to give a talk, I got free hand on what I can talk about, so that's a chance I decided to take. So maybe this is not the usual talk for a tech conference. For more than 50 years, politics and especially the economy have been increasingly driven by digital information. Data is the new oil and information is the new gold. That seems to be the motto of our times. But this analogy should be a warning sign to us, because it's the old oil economy that is responsible for the global climate change and is worsening and threatening the lives of hundreds of millions of people all around the globe. So maybe it makes sense that we tackle the course of this new information society today before we face similar irreversible consequences tomorrow. The term information society distracts from what this is really about, this paradigm shift. It's not so much about information itself, as it is about how information is collected, stored, owned, processed, and especially used, and all this in a social context, not a technical context. So I prefer to use the term cybernetic society for these emerging processes and structures. The term cybernetics was first used in a socio-political context by the Greek philosopher Plato around 350 BC. He used it to describe the essence of government and comparing that with the helmsman that is navigating the ship society through troubled waters. More than 2,000 years later, the physicist Jean-Marie Ampère revives the term cybernetics and uses it to place the science of government into his classification system of human knowledge. Modern-day cybernetics came to life in the World War II and basically became an interdisciplinary science that tries to mathematically formalize general principles of regulation and control in systems, regardless of their nature. According to Norbert Wiener, the godfather of modern cybernetics, every system, all biological, social, or technical systems are governed by these same principles and can therefore be modeled in their behavior with the same mathematical set of methods. With this help of such a model, the regulatory mechanisms can be used to derive the instruments of control in a real system. This sounds very complex, but I give you an easy example. The standard textbook example of a simple cybernetic model is the regulation of a room temperature by a heater and a thermostat. The thermostat is the cybernetic control element in the form of a feedback loop that keeps the temperature of the room at a defined level. The cybernetic model that manifests itself in these control elements abstracts from the complexity of the real system. It does not care about the intricity involved, like heat transport, insulation, efficiency. For cybernetics, it does not matter if the model properly describes the inner working of a real system, as long as the observable behavior is the same. Even this simple example shows us two important points. First, that regulation and control in a cybernetic system serves to achieve and maintain a predefined state in a real system. Cybernetic control is thus the freezing of a state by default. The second and ultimately much more decisive point is the question that is never addressed in any cybernetic textbook. It's the question, who decides what state should be achieved and adhered to? In case of the room temperature, this may not be so serious because you have a number of options if you do not like the temperature. You can complain to the person that is controlling the thermostat. You can put on clothes if it's too cold. You can open the window if it's too warm. And you can even leave the room and thus completely escape the control loop. The larger and more comprehensive a control loop, the less opportunities for influence or alternative options are available. As we will see, in a cybernetic society, these alternatives practically do not exist any longer. A cybernetic society can be best described as a society in which socio-political regulation and control and the underlying economy are governed by cybernetic regulatory circuits. But first, we must address the question how and whether and how a complex system like the society or an economical system can even be represented by a cybernetic model. How do you get that? Well, modeling of real social and economic systems failed miserably in the early days of cybernetics. Although a reduction of the complexity, which usually means a reduction of the inflowing data, led to models, but these usually showed a different behavior than the real system they try to replicate. Cybernetics, thanks to advances in informatics especially, had its successes in technical systems. But in the last millennium, it did not really work for systems such as society or the economy. Not that it was not tried, like in the CyberSyn project in Chile in the early 70s. And the situation even worsened for a while because the increase of the available data on real systems driven by computers and later networks was simply no longer manageable with the methods of classical cybernetics. But of course, this is not the end of the story. Cybernetics thrives more than Wiener could have ever imagined in his wildest dreams. It's just not called cybernetics anymore. Today we call it machine learning or even artificial intelligence. But the general approach is still the same, and the ideas of cybernetics are the basis for machine learning. Systems are treated as black boxes that can be represented by a cybernetic model that reproduce the observable behavior of the real system. The main difference is how to construct such a model. Classical cybernetics is very similar to computer programming. You write a program based on your expertise, which in itself is your mental model of a problem. And the program then, if written correctly, converts an input to the expected output. Machine learning works in a completely different way. You need vast amounts of data to automatically train a model that, when fed with new input data, predicts the resulting output data with astounding accuracy. But machine learning is knowing without understanding. It is unexplainable how and why the algorithm is able to predict outputs. But the advantages of such a model outweighs this annoyance for many people. Since a cybernetic model trained by machine learning can actually represent any real or virtual system, and the limit is your imagination and the available data, it can be used for any intention. The intention, basically the goal in terms of regulation, is the essential factor that will determine what the model will learn during supervised training. If your intention changes, you need to train a new model with it. You can't turn just a few screws here and there to make the old model work with a new goal. However, given the current state and the accelerating pace of computer technology, this is no longer a real drawback. No wonder that machine learning and artificial intelligence become an ubiquitous technology in so many areas of our daily lives, often without us even noticing it. I will not waste time enumerating all the areas in which today's machine learning algorithms are already being used to fulfill the intentions of their masters. The list is growing faster and faster. In the near future, it will be easier to list the areas where it is not used. Today, we are mostly confronted with algorithms used by companies with access to big data assets, most notably the big three: Facebook, Google, Amazon. Their data pools are filled by increasingly digital business processes through our interactions: buying from Amazon, searching on Google, watching movies on Netflix, liking posts on Facebook, tweeting on Twitter, sending and receiving email on Yahoo. A source of data that never runs dry. And all the algorithms used by these companies have only one goal: to maximize the financial and informational exploitation of its users. The feedback loop in a commercial algorithm with this intention must be designed to influence the user to behave in the interest of the company rather than in its self-interest. This can only be achieved by an emotional manipulation that either makes the user believe that he's acting to his own advantage, or, as in the case of a recommendation system, demands a desired behavior through subtle social pressure. The toolbox for this type of manipulation is provided by the theory of behaviorism, very much linked to the name B.F. Skinner, and the modern methodologies of psychometrics. Companies like Cambridge Analytica use algorithms to classify individual people's personality traits from publicly available data, and allows them to influence the mood and thus the behavior of these subjects. Not only useful if you want to sell something, but very useful when you're trying to influence an election or a political campaign. This brings together two basic techniques of a cybernetic society: cybernetics as the science, as a model of regulation, and behaviorism as an instrument of control. Together, they make it possible to automate the manipulation of human behavior. Although these applications of cybernetics in the corporate world are disturbing, to say the least, new systems are being planned and implemented on an even greater scale today. Governments are beginning to contemplate the possibility of cybernetic control on a national level, which will subordinate the big data pools of corporations to the intent of the state and influence the daily lives of every single citizen. Societal systems are far more complex than tightly defined economic systems and require an even vaster amount of data for modeling or machine learning. In this context, mass surveillance by the public, by government agencies, is essential to create the amount of data points available to the algorithms. The advent of cybernetics in politics and society seems unstoppable. Saudi Arabia is the first country to grant citizenship to a robot. The European Parliament is also considering certifying robots as electronic persons. Japan is the first country where an AI is running for mayor. And in China, a cybernetic control system will become mandatory for all citizens in 2 years' time. In this Chinese social credit system, each citizen is assigned a score that indicates how compliant the individual is with government policies and regulations. Above all, this score is calculated from the data that everyone generates in the digital world, with the help and under the control of algorithms. So it's not forbidden to play first-person shooter video games, but your score will go down in the long run, just as it will go up if you regularly attend party-organized events. Jobs, apartments, and privileges are available only to people above a certain score. If you do not have the required score, you better not apply in the first place if you do not want to lose your face. But the really creepy feature in the Chinese system is the connection of the rating to social interactions. Your score depends not only on your actions, it also depends on the action and the scores of your friends. And who your friends are is something an algorithm can very easily derive from the available data. If you are looking for a high score, you better have no friends who could negatively impact your rating. No wonder that the display of the social credit score on Chinese dating sites is becoming more and more dominant, even it's not mandatory today. This mechanism of regulation, which relies not only on the self-control and self-restraint of the individual, which would be bad enough, but also incorporates the social relationship with other people. That is both brilliant and abominable, especially because the individual has no way to escape the system. It is to be feared that this kind of approach will not be limited to China in the long run. The effects of a cybernetic society are manifold. The most serious impact, in my view, is a civilizational freeze, because cybernetic regulations, as we have learned, is always trying to reach and maintain a target state. Changes, and thus also potential improvements, can only be understood as disruptive factors that have to be eliminated. In the best case, it's just hubris that makes us all believe that a certain status quo in society can be an optimum. In the worst case, it's the ultimate tool for long-term power consolidation. Whatever the case, our emerging cybernetic society is not going to look like the techno-hippie romantic dreams of the 60s, when people believed that computers will enable the paradise on Earth for all of humanity, where people can live and thrive in the best of all worlds, all watched over by machines of loving grace. It will look different simply because the intent behind the algorithms is self-interest of plutocrats and oligarchs and not the interest in the common good. That most people are not much interested in the common good anyway, but are guided by self-interest is actually an advantage for the algorithm. They know how to manipulate you in very, very subtle ways, and it's hard to escape them. In the end, you could even believe that buying this new gadget is in your own interest. The cyberization of our society has already begun and is affecting more and more areas of our daily lives, not just if we buy something from the big three on the internet. Cybernetic control is applied to our critical infrastructure like energy, think of smart grid, communication, transport, think of self-driving cars, and urbanity, think of smart cities, and many other public services. Our dependencies on algorithms of all kinds increases every day, and with it our dependencies on global companies that build, own, and run them. Some of you might wonder why we should bother with these issues at all, especially if the consequences of a cybernetic society are more comfort, efficiency, and reliability in all our lives. Well, most Chinese people would probably agree with you, but they already have no more chance to escape the system. We still have that chance. Not for long, maybe. And there's still no master plan on how. There's still no master plan in sight on how to get this thing right. People are starting to see a deeper problem, but they have no clue on how to handle this, including the politicians. It is interesting to note that the general public is pretty much aware of the machinations of Facebook, but most of them seem to have resigned and accepted their fate while enjoying the benefits that come along with it. When the Snowden revelations happened 5 years ago, we at least had the fig leaf of encryption against spying eyes. We wrote programs and taught people on how to protect themselves in their digital communication, in their own interest. At the moment, we don't even have such a tool against the cybernetic society. Nothing we can teach and give to people, no positive input to reverse resignation. Currently, only people with a hacker mindset can have fun with algorithms and trick them in unexpected ways. Exploiting the difference in the view angle between a human driver and a camera on a self-driving car, hackers manipulated traffic signs so that a human driver still recognizes the correct meaning, while the algorithm recognizes another contradicting sign and acts accordingly. Machine learning algorithms can also be used by hackers against their adversaries, appropriating technology has always been a hacker trade. But in the end, algorithms are only programs running on computers. And we all know how safe that is, don't we? So finally, we can give an answer to a question that Val Holland, the founder of the Chaos Computer Club in Germany, raised in the 1980s. What is the hack of a computer compared to hacking a society? Well, now we can give an answer. It will be the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernd. We have a few minutes for questions. I mean, I don't even know where to start. I mean, I don't know whether to laugh or to cry when listening to these stories. Does anybody have a question? We have a mic going around. I mean, yes, over there.
Hi, Bernd. Thank you for your presentation. Is it too late?
No, I don't think it is too late, but we're certainly not at a point where we can wait much longer. I think these things are happening today, and I think we need to start a broader public discussion about these issues, because I think it's not discussed enough in public. The effects that these changes in society will have, the impact that it will have, is something that I personally consider as bad. But I know that the emerging society is generating a different kind of person as well. Kids that grew up today use computer technology in a very different way than we did when we grew up. So that the issues that I feel frightening and scaring about this cybernetic society might be something other people do not see. So I don't think it's too late, but I think too few people are actually discussing this or even thinking about the cybernetic society. And I think we all should, because it will affect our lives tremendously.
Exactly, that's why I wanted to have this panel and this discussion in the privacy topic. I'm very thankful to you.
And what do you think about situations where, I mean, you might have a corrupt government, whether it's on a local level or state level,
yeah.
If we already have the technology, like you said, an AI, an artificial intelligence entity running for mayor, in a situation like that, isn't it better replacing the corrupt people with an AI? Or you know, is that wishful thinking?
No, it's not wishful thinking. It's basically believing the narratives of the cybernetic people, so to speak, right? Because they give you the impression, and the word artificial intelligence is something separate from humans, right? It's something that basically acts without human influence. Of course, it's not true. There is always a person or persons behind any artificial intelligence or algorithm. And ultimately, these tools, these machine learning and algorithms or even artificial intelligence is just a tool for people to achieve their goals, their own self-interest. So if you think about this AI running as a mayor in Japan, actually it has a good chance to get the election, because nobody else is interested in becoming mayor anyway. It's not a big city, it's a suburb of Tokyo. But if you know that the people running this AI are the former executive of Microsoft, and the other one is the former executive of Google in Japan, then you know that these people do not do that for the common good. I mean, I simply cannot believe that, right? So there's always a person behind the algorithm and the artificial intelligence, and it's the intention and the intention of this person that we have to ask, and not if the AI can better decide and not being corrupt.
And what about the distinction between narrow AI and general AI? Because I think the situation you're describing is where AI has a human overlord. But if we advance, say, artificial intelligence to a state where it has general intelligence, where it can sympathize with humans or with other AIs and has emotion, which I don't know if technology can achieve that, but do you think we're still heading down the same sort of Orwellian path?
I mean, maybe it's even worse if we do not have the humans behind the algorithms anymore. I mean, if we really have such an advanced AI technology coming from unsupervised learning that is basically able to completely independently act from human beings, how can we expect to share our human values? I mean, whatever decisions these machines take, how can they take into effect all these non-quantifiable factors in our lives that are so important, like freedom, like privacy, like compassion, like fear, like everything that is important for us as human beings cannot be something an algorithm can grasp. It fucking does not compute for an algorithm. So better that this is not going to happen, that AIs run completely independent of people.
We have a raised hand right here.
Thank you very much for this presentation. It was very interesting. So what is the solution you propose? How should we users, let's say, behave in social medias and so on?
Actually, I left that out from the talk because I thought it would be too negative to elaborate on that. Because I think it's completely naivete to believe that you can have privacy on platforms like Google or Facebook or Twitter. It's simply not possible because the whole business model of these corporations is defined by not giving you this right? By accessing your data, by extracting data from this, or information from this data from you. So I think there is no way to have privacy on these social media platforms, which means the only way to not be exploited is to not participate, right? And every time you argue that it fulfills your need, that it is in your interest to actually use this platform, then your interest and the interest of the company is completely aligned, right? That's why so many people are using it in the first place. So they do not meet the manipulation because they think it's their own interest to use it because they can communicate with friends and stuff like that. So if you have, and I agree, if that is the deep human need to do this communication, then you have to do it in platforms that by default do not allow this kind of misuse of your data.
So sounds a bit like the Borg from Star Trek, you know, where they have this saying, resistance is futile, just surrender.
I have to admit I have no solution. I have no master plan, as I said in the talk. And I also do not see a real theory of this new society yet. Right? There have been very few people thinking about it. Eugene Morozov is probably one of them. But there are not many people realizing that the society is changing in a very much more dramatic way than most people realize.
Well, thank you for that. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.